The 2025-26 season already carries an unusual weight for Boston, with Jayson Tatum sidelined for most of the year due to his Achilles injury, and several familiar veterans no longer in the picture. The Celtics are being forced into a transitional moment that could either expose weaknesses or reveal hidden opportunities. This uncertainty opens the door to bold ideas, and one of them might be more shocking than anything fans could imagine. Reports circulating in recent weeks have linked Boston to Los Angeles Lakers guard Bronny James. The very idea feels like a storyline pulled out of a script, the son of LeBron James leaving the purple and gold, crossing the historic divide, and joining the most decorated rival franchise of his father's career. Just the thought raises the question, would Boston dare to be the team that unlocks Bronny's potential away from the Hollywood spotlight? Sports Illustrated's Ben Steinar presented the possibility, pointing out the difficulties Bronny has faced. In Los Angeles, with limited minutes, underwhelming efficiency, and the never-ending shadow of his father, his development has been stunted. Steinar suggested that a move to Boston could completely change the trajectory of his young career. The Celtics, after all, have consistently proven capable of molding raw talent into rotation pieces, often turning overlooked names into reliable contributors. But the conversation goes far deeper than raw stats. In just 27 appearances last year, Bronny's NBA numbers looked unimpressive. Yet in the G League, he displayed flashes that cannot be ignored, averaging nearly 22 points along with strong rebounding and playmaking, and shooting close to 40%. From deep, Bronny showed that given a platform, he can create real impact. The Celtics, entering a season where experimentation will be unavoidable, might be the exact environment where he can bridge the gap between hype and production. Now, here is the bigger question. Is this about filling Tatum's temporary void? Or is it about planting a seed for the future? If Boston were to acquire Bronny, they would not only be taking a risk on untapped upside, they would also be sending a shockwave across the league. Imagine the headlines if the Celtics managed to develop Bronny into a consistent contributor. The rivalry with the Lakers would gain a completely new layer, one that would be talked about for decades. Of course, the controversial opinion many are afraid to say out loud is this: Bronny might need Boston more than Boston needs Bronny. Away from his father's presence, from the noise of Los Angeles, and from the weight of expectations he never asked for, he could rediscover his own identity as a player. The Celtics could offer him the chance to prove that his career is not simply tied to his last name. Tyronn Lue, who coached LeBron James during his Cleveland years, has revealed a moment so raw that it continues to echo today. The instant LeBron learned that Kyrie Irving had been traded to the Boston Celtics. According to Lue, the scene was surreal. LeBron was at an event, casually signing jerseys for his foundation, when the news broke on live television. The words appeared on the SportsCenter ticker, "Kyrie Irving has been traded to the Boston Celtics." LeBron froze, marker slipping from his hand, leaning back in silence for nearly 10 minutes. No words, no reaction, just disbelief. For a player who built his career on resilience and immediate responses, that silence was louder than any outburst. Why was it so crushing? Because Kyrie was not just another teammate. He was the man who delivered the shot that rewrote Cleveland history, the three-pointer over Stephen Curry that completed the miracle comeback against the 73-win Warriors. Together, they had forged one of the most dangerous duos the league had ever seen. To watch that partnership dissolve, and to Boston of all destinations, was a wound that LeBron could not disguise. The most intriguing part is how Lue compared it to the Kobe and Shaq split, a decision that left championships on the table. Kyrie had grown tired of the shadow, eager to prove that he could lead a franchise. Cleveland's front office, instead of forcing reconciliation, granted him the escape, and in that choice, the league shifted. Imagine the alternative scenario. If Kyrie stays, if Kevin Durant never lands in Golden State, could the Cavaliers have ruled the league for years? Lue himself admitted he believed they could have collected 2 or even 3 more titles. Instead, the breakup forced Cleveland into decline and accelerated LeBron's departure to Los Angeles. Yet here is where the story takes an even more fascinating turn. Kyrie's new home was Boston, a franchise known for transforming chaos into legacy, for taking controversial moves and reshaping them into banners. For Celtics fans, that 2017 trade was more than acquiring talent. It was a sign that Boston was not afraid to take bold risks, even if it meant shaking the league at its core. What many overlook is how personal the moment was for LeBron. He had weathered finals defeats, media storms, even the decision backlash. Yet the quiet of that afternoon revealed something deeper. Losing Kyrie was not about stats or titles. It was about trust, about the belief that the partnership built on one of the most iconic finals victories would last longer. When that belief shattered, so did Cleveland's dynasty hopes. What if one of the most respected leaders in Boston's locker room suddenly chose to continue his career in the very franchise that once stood as the Celtics' greatest modern rival? That is the scenario now unfolding, with reports suggesting that Al Horford, the veteran who embodied Boston's championship culture, has verbally agreed to a 2-year deal with the Golden State Warriors. At first glance, it seems like just another late off-season signing, but the deeper you look, the more dramatic this move becomes. Boston and Golden State have not only fought for titles, they have defined an era of basketball where culture, resilience, and dynasties collided. Now, the same veteran who anchored Boston's defense and stretched the floor in the finals is rumored to be switching sides. The details matter. According to Clutch Point's Brett Siegel, Horford is expected to sign a 2-year deal with a player option, making him one of the very few Warriors additions that break from minimum contracts this offseason. While Golden State has been slow and quiet in free agency, juggling Jonathan Kuminga's restricted free agency talks, this potential Horford signing feels less like roster filler and more like a calculated strike. Why is this so important? Because Horford was never just numbers. Even at 39, his averages of 9 points, 6 rebounds, and steady shooting efficiency only tell a fraction of the story. His value to Boston was not only in what showed up in the box score, but in his ability to anchor lineups, neutralize opposing bigs, and provide calm when chaos struck. Losing that presence would sting any franchise, but especially Boston, where his leadership became an invisible glue in their championship push. The shocking part is not simply that Horford might leave, it is where he might land. Golden State is not rebuilding. They are trying to squeeze the last drops of contention out of the Curry era. For the Warriors, adding Horford would be about much more than depth. It would be about experience, strategy, and a piece of the Celtics' winning DNA. For Boston fans, the thought raises uncomfortable but fascinating questions. What secrets of preparation and mentality could Horford carry from one locker room to another? But here is the angle that no one seems to be saying. If Horford truly makes this move, it does not necessarily weaken Boston's future. Instead, it clears space for the next wave. The Celtics, after shedding the contracts of Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis to avoid the luxury tax, are in a position where flexibility could become their biggest weapon. Without being anchored to aging salaries, Boston can turn toward younger talent, unexpected signings, and potential trades that reshape the team's depth. Horford's departure might look like a loss, but it could also be the quiet beginning of another bold era. The most intriguing question is whether this is really the end of Horford's bond with Boston. A verbal agreement is not the same as a signature, and until the ink dries, Celtics fans will wonder, could there still be one last twist? Horford has always been calculated about his decisions, choosing places where his presence matters most. If there is even the slightest chance he sees Boston's transitional season as one where his leadership could make the difference again, this story may not be over. What if one of the Celtics' boldest long-term bets was given away before fans ever had the chance to see what he could truly become? That is exactly the scenario floated by Bleacher Report's Zach Buckley, whose trade proposal would send Hugo Gonzalez and a future second-round pick to Washington in exchange for Justin Champagnie. On paper, it looks like a small move, but beneath the surface, it could be one of the most counterproductive decisions Boston could ever make. The question that instantly comes to mind is simple. Why would the Celtics sacrifice upside for mediocrity? Brad Stevens has built his reputation on creativity, yes, but also on patience with players who fit Boston's culture. Gonzalez was selected in the first round for a reason, not as a throw-in, but as a calculated investment into a 19-year-old wing with the athleticism, frame, and instincts to grow into a two-way weapon. Champagny, while serviceable, is not the type of player who changes Boston's trajectory. He has carved out a role as an energy guard with streaky shooting, but his ceiling is already visible. At 24 years old, his career numbers sit at 6.1 points per game on 36% from deep. Respectable production, but nothing that moves the needle for a team that has championship aspirations once Jayson Tatum returns. Gonzalez, meanwhile, represents possibility. He spent his formative years with Real Madrid, a system known for developing intelligent, versatile players. His size at 6'6" with a sturdy frame allows him to defend multiple positions, while his natural playmaking instincts separate him from the typical athletic wing. In Europe, he showed flashes of being more than a role player, of being someone who could create, disrupt, and adapt to any lineup. Why would Boston cash in that lottery ticket so quickly? The financial aspect makes this trade even harder to justify. Gonzalez is on a team-friendly rookie deal, costing less than $500,000 more than Champagny, while offering a much higher ceiling. In a league where every dollar matters under the new luxury tax rules, cheap upside is gold. Boston has no reason to hand that value to a rebuilding franchise like Washington, especially not for a player whose impact could be replicated by depth pieces already on the roster. But the real drama lies in timing. This is not just about Gonzalez versus Champagny. It is about Boston's roadmap through the Tatum injury and beyond. The Celtics are in a season where experimentation is not only acceptable, it is necessary. Gonzalez is expected to see real minutes this year, a rare opportunity to test a rookie in a competitive environment without jeopardizing long-term contention. By the time Tatum returns, Boston will know exactly what kind of weapon they have in Gonzalez. Giving that up now would mean wasting one of the rare silver linings of this transitional year. And yet, this rumor sparks a bigger curiosity. If Gonzalez is already being thrown into fake trade machines, what does that say about how rival teams view him? Are the Wizards and others circling, hoping Boston undervalues him the way they once undervalued other future stars? Could this be a sign that Gonzalez's stock is actually higher than people realize, making him not a player to sell off cheaply, but one to guard carefully until his breakout moment? The curiosity here is obvious. Why would Brad Stevens trade away a young, proven scorer on an expiring contract? A player with the kind of offensive versatility Boston has rarely had off the bench. Why move him before the team even understands how he fits into Joe Mazzulla's system? Yes, Boston shed massive contracts this offseason. Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday were moved to ease the tax burden, while ownership changed hands from Wyc Grousbeck to Bill Chisholm, signaling a new era. The Celtics are no longer paying for comfort, they are paying for survival under the restrictive apron rules. Every dollar counts, and at $27.6 million, Simons is not cheap, but cutting costs is only one side of the story. The other side is value, and Simons brings plenty of it. Last season, he averaged 19.3 points and 4.8 assists per game, drilling 215 threes at a 36% clip. That is not an empty stat line from a rebuilding team. It is the production of a guard who has learned how to create space, score under pressure, and stretch defenses in ways Boston has often struggled to do without Tatum on the floor. Imagine Simons paired with Jaylen Brown in stretches where Boston desperately needs shot creation. That dynamic alone could change the narrative of this so-called reset year. But here is where the real tension lies. The Celtics are not expected to chase a title in 2025-26. Without Tatum, expectations shift from banners to evaluations. This season becomes a laboratory, a testing ground for who will matter when the real fight resumes in 2026-27. That is exactly why moving Simons now would be reckless. Boston needs to see what he looks like when given a featured role, what kind of chemistry he builds with Brown and White, and whether his skill set can evolve under Mazzulla's fast-paced, perimeter-heavy system. There is another layer to this that no one is talking about. If Simons thrives in Boston, his trade value skyrockets. Expiring contracts paired with real production are gold in the modern NBA. Right now, rival executives see him as a pricey gamble. But if he spends the first half of the season averaging 20 points while holding his own defensively, then suddenly he becomes the centerpiece in a blockbuster package, the kind of deal that actually delivers Boston the next co-star alongside Tatum. Trading him prematurely would destroy that leverage. And then comes the wild card question. What if Simons is not just a trade chip? What if he is the missing piece? At 26, he is entering his prime, and Boston has a recent history of turning overlooked players into system gems. Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser, even Derek White were not viewed as difference makers until Boston unlocked them. Could Simons be the next in that lineage? A guard who blossoms in a winning culture, who finally reaches his ceiling in green rather than in Portland's endless rebuild. The financial argument will not disappear. The Celtics remain $12 million into the tax, and moving Simons could provide instant relief. But ask yourself this: is saving dollars today worth risking the possibility of discovering Boston's next long-term scorer? That is the gamble Stevens must weigh, and history suggests he values potential impact far more than short-term savings.